Yeah. Good afternoon. Volume? Enough volume so people can hear at the back? Thank you. Can you hear in the back row? Because we always have trouble on the other side. That's a little bit too much volume. It's echoing all over now. So somewhere right in between that so people can hear and I don't get balance. So thank you for being here this evening. It's just 7:01 and I'd like to call to order our regular meeting of council for Wednesday, June 6th, 2018. We have a couple of minor amendments to the agenda, one of which would be to under new business, because we never have new business, item 9, I'd like to put the letter from the Rotary Club of the Sunshine Coast, Sechelt. It's dated May 30th, and it just came in just as we were doing the agenda, so we can put that under new business. And were there any other amendments from staff? Not at this time, nothing from council. Then I'd look for a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Shanks seconding. All those in favor? And we can proceed. The first item on our agenda, we have 2 delegations this evening, both about the West Porpoise Bay Estates and in terms of the development and height variance. And we begin with Mr. Tyler Schmidt, which is the architecture for RTC Properties. Sir, as soon as you press the button, we'll turn the microphone on for you.
Bingo.
And just so the other parties know, but both parties that are presenting this evening know, we're actually not going to be making a decision on this item tonight. It's coming forward and there is a recommendation for a report to council, but the actual decision is not something we'll be addressing. Oh, I'm sorry. And Councillor Lutz vacated the room because she has a perceived conflict of interest because of where she resides. So that's the reason she got up and left. And she'll come back when she's had a nice walk around outside in good weather. Mr. Schmidt.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I just wanted to give a brief overview of the process that we've been through on this development, and just to clarify certain issues that I don't necessarily know have been properly addressed by ourselves or throughout this process. So one of the first things is, before this property was purchased, we received a 100-page document, letter of comfort, from the District of Sechelt, outlining the zoning, what could be done with the property, the density, all those sorts of things. And this formed part of the basis for the purchase of the property. When the previous developer went into receivership, one of the things that was in place when the property was purchased, well, actually was not in place, that had lapsed, was this document called a Form P. And the Form P is a requirement under the Land Titles Act for the registration of a phased strata development. So it describes the exact form of the development, the density, associated unit entitlements, timing and commencement and completion of each phase. And once the Form P is signed by the approving officer, it's registered with the BC Land Titles Office and becomes a legally binding document which binds all parties involved and those affected by it in the future. So the original Form P, as I previously said, had expired, and so it needed to be redone. And in redoing it, the RTC Properties didn't agree with the way the development was previously envisioned, and so we completely redid it in consultation with the district. Now, in order to get the new Form P put in, the old one had to be disposed of, and the disposition of the original Form P required application to be made to the Supreme Court of BC and then later at the Land Titles Office. And all of the people that were in the previous 3 phases of that development had to sign the document in order for this to be disposed of. So the one is from the president of the Strata Corporation and all the owners at the time that this was done. So the new Form P defines the building heights, parking, unit types, sizes, timing, commencement of the phases, and was extensively worked over with the planning and engineering departments. And notwithstanding that we've gone through several different planning people and personnel, the district never wavered in their view of how this development should go, and we've always had a really good working relationship and vision as to how this whole development should be implemented. So after that, the plans were done, the unit entitlements were done, all these things were done and submitted to the approving officer, who then signed it, and then it was registered at the land titles. Now this was the Form P that was registered, and I just wanted to show you the plans. These were, this shows all the, you can't read it, but it's all the different unit entitlements. I just wanted to demonstrate that it was a very detailed document. Now these were the disclosure documents that were signed by the people who purchased in the Grandview here. So as part of the sale of these units, this Form P was distributed as part of the disclosure documents, and then those are the signatures of acknowledgement of the receipt of the disclosure documents. So moving into the vision and direction of this whole project, we went through the OCP extensively, both ourselves and with the district. Looked at all the goals and the vision for Sechelt in that particular area, offering a mixed-use residential option suitable for all age groups, particularly seniors contemplating downsizing, close proximity to the downtown, integration with surrounding neighborhoods, etc. We had to look at development planning areas 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So 3 and 4 were marine foreshore guidelines, rocky beach fronts, and those basically talk about the environment and the impact on the environment. This development is 15 meters back from the high water mark, and nothing is being built within those rocky areas, and so it's in complete sync with those guidelines. Some of the cogent issues of the downtown thing is to create pedestrian interest, be integrated with adjacent buildings to be 2 to 3 stories high. Flat roofs are acceptable when we have green roofs, which we do in this development. And the parking areas should be landscaped or screened. Again, we took great care to do that. One of the biggest things is that this is currently zoned as R4 zone, and that's a prescriptive document that tells you what you can do and can't do. But one of the main tenets in that particular DPA is that new developments must meet the needs of the community as well as provide quality design. Smaller, more affordable, fully accessible, low-maintenance residential units are needed for growing numbers of seniors and single adults, as well as starter homes for young adults and families. So we really took that to heart when we looked at this. Just a brief look at the site. These are the existing stratas that were in place at the time. This particular building was partially purchased, and this is the area that remains to be developed. And it's just a context map to show that there's 3-story buildings at the apex of this hill. They have huge rock walls here. This particular building sits on top of a parking podium. It's 3 stories above that. When this development started to take place, these people's views were altered to some degree. And that's just sort of the nature of urban development. This is just another shot showing these large rock walls, which are not terribly attractive, but it's just to give some context. One of the other DPA areas is the steep slopes. So minimize alteration to natural grades. This is an overriding thing. It's always talking about the environment having a light touch on the site, not cutting and filling and slashing and burning. And so that's why this particular development is sitting on stilts with the parkade just lightly touching the steep mountainside. Again, it's preserving natural features of the vegetation. We've looked at that to keep the area open, to keep all the, to encourage ivy to grow onto the stilts and to maintain the watershed and all those sorts of things. The other thing is reducing the footprints of the buildings. So we've brought the number of building sites from 16 down to 6. We reduced the length of the roads because we've put the parking below the buildings to keep them off of the site so that they're not visible and to keep the traffic and pedestrian separate as much as possible. So this was the old approved Form P, and as I've said, there's 16 units, and out of all these units, all but 1, 2, and 3 of them were 2 stories. The rest of them were 3 stories described in the document as slab on grade. So in order to do a slab on grade, you literally need to build a big slab out there and then build something on top of it. So all along here were 3-story buildings. When the property was originally purchased, this was the property line going around the entire property. As the property was developed and the stratas were completed, new property lines were established. So when the property was purchased, these boundaries were already established, and that was the way, that was the property line when the property was purchased. Now, one of the issues with this is that there's a couple of units here that actually have garage access into them off of this road, and it was just an unfortunate circumstance of however these property lines were whoever put them in place. Having said that, we realize that we're willing to work with the owners of these units to provide access on the land so they can get into the garage. This is just a slide to demonstrate what could be done under the existing zoning. There could be multiple buildings, all 3 stories high, without any height variances or anything. But one of the issues with this one is that they're not all handicap accessible. They're walk-up units. They're more expensive because there's obviously way more buildings. There's another road and extensive cutting and filling. So it was just one of the options that was explored and rejected, but I just wanted that for illustration purposes. We've sort of gone through all that. This is the site as designed. So the buildings are set down into the site so that the views are out over top of the buildings. And this I wanted to show as an example of when zoning is done. Most zoning is done with the vision of a flat site or a level site. And so this demonstrates that you're allowed a 10.5 meter high building on a flat site and an underground parking, which is not included in the area calculations or the units. So all we've done is we've taken that same building and shifted it down. So we haven't added any density. We're not looking for bonuses or anything. The reason that we shifted them down was to try to maintain a 2-story height along that road so that it's a more, so that the scale is more in keeping with a regular sort of residential neighborhood rather than having a large 3-story structure there. This is just demonstrating again how it could be, but we said, why would you put a building here blocking all the views for here? Why would you have to cut and fill all this land to get these buildings down? This particular thing is a low-level parking along here, which everybody can look over top. The access to the park down here is easy, and it still gets the same amount of density that we're after. It also, by having smaller units within fewer buildings, it helps with the affordability portion of this. This was the existing Grandview when the property was first built. So you can see that this is like almost a 4-story structure anyways. And this particular portion here, which is storage and so on, the parking structure in front is no higher than that. So all the rest of the units are above that. This is just another demonstration. This shows the existing stratas that are along the west part of the site. So again, it just is to demonstrate the extensive cutting and filling, that no matter what is done on this site, really, these views are going to be altered. So again, this is just to demonstrate that we've brought it to 2 stories along that road, and parking is off to minimize the impact of cars and so on the site, to make it more pedestrian friendly. This is just a graph which shows what, whoops, sorry. This graph just shows what's permitted in the R4 zoning, the original form, and what the approved form is. So we're allowed 98 apartments. We're allowed 78 townhouses. We've proposed 89 apartments, partly so that fits on the site nicely, partly that it reduces the number of cars, because under the bylaws for apartments, you need 1.5 stalls per unit versus 2 stalls per unit in townhouses. So out of the permitted parking stalls, there's 147, we have 135. We've reduced our site coverage, the allowable site coverage under the bylaws, 75%, we're at 60%. The rest of these setbacks and the DPAs, we're all within the guidelines and meet those criteria. And so these are just some shots of how it's nestling into the site. The trees will be growing up in front of them. We're maintaining the vegetation along the foreshore. Again, these are just some shots looking up from the water side. We're using materials that are complementary to the site, to the vegetation around there. And again, this is showing sort of a more streetscape with lower buildings that are articulated to provide a more pedestrian-friendly residential flavor, and so on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that.
So
Is there any clarifications from council? And it has been a little longer than normal, so we'll try and keep them brief. Councillor Inkster.
I think, you know what, Mr. Mayor,
I recognize
the buttons aren't working. Yeah.
So we'll come back. Councillor Inkster.
So help me understand here, towards the end there, you presented a helpful view of the proposed buildings and how they would look in the end. If you can flip back to that, I just want to ask you a question in reference to that.
Sure.
Go back further. And further? Okay, great. And, yeah. So there's, obviously, you've done a good job. I'm assuming that's buildings that you're proposing?
Yes.
Correct. Okay, so you've done a good job of putting them in with the trees there and the existing trees. Hopefully, there's a retention of many of those trees when you do build. I always like to see that. But if you were, and I don't know if you have a pointer with you, maybe you can quickly do a quick description. The buildings that sit in behind, the existing residents that will be concerned about view and/or view corridors and viewscapes, where are they positioned with? You do have a pointer, it seems, so that's helpful.
These particular buildings are the buildings that are directly in front of the ground view, which sits up in here. So the ground view looks straight out over those.
Okay. That's the existing building?
Yeah, so that's,
Okay.
that's this building here.
Okay. But
And this is the existing
the existing
building that was just
Okay.
finished.
And that includes your, complete your, all your phases that you're proposing to us as,
This is
because
just
I keep hearing about other pieces, so I'm just wondering.
yeah, okay, well, I guess
Yeah.
there's, I'll go to the plan. So I believe these people were concerned with the views,
Yeah,
but this site slopes down towards the water. This parking area with the green roofs and everything is 1 story high, which is the same height as the storage area here. So all the other stories look out right over top of that.
and those.
And that was fully disclosed when these units were sold in any event.
Okay,
All
5
this-
and 6 are your proposed buildings.
Yeah.
Okay,
So then the other units were here, and with respects to views, there's view corridors through here, but no matter what happens, by virtue of this zoning, these views are going to be affected. It doesn't matter what's done there.
Okay, I'll just remind everyone that this has all gone through public hearing, and it's been through planning committee. I haven't seen anything much new, and councillors should have all been informed. This is coming back to us for development permit, and there will be a report on that. So are there any clarifications of his report and what was provided? And Councillor Mueller had some comments? Comments? No?
Okay, just a quick one while we have you here. I mean, what I heard from council and committee was issues around height. And I'm going to be asking the same thing of the next presenter, how height plays into this. And so I just want to know, because you're the architect, in the design phase, what did you do in your mind to help mitigate that? And what kind of leeway do you still have in design in terms of mitigating the impacts of the height? Because that's more or less, you know, the variance that was asked for was around height. And I think that's the key issue. So if you could speak to that.
Well, it's, without getting into the minutia of how this, there's various formulas on how you determine average natural grade, and that determines a median, and above that, you measure up your 10.5 meters. So this is a kind of a technical variance in the sense that, as I was saying, if, oops, I keep hitting the wrong button. If this was a flat site, then it would just be, that would be it. You'd be able to build right up to that point. And we elected, the developer elected that, you know, to maintain the more neighborhood thing, to push these buildings down as far as possible. But they don't technically meet with every little nuance of how you determine average natural grade, which is why this height variance has come into play. Now, if we built it without a height variance, the result is an inferior product, frankly.
Yeah, and if I can just direct you towards the parts that I'm particularly curious about, it's the parts that are on stilts, the area below the stilts.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, it's a steeply sloped project, so it could have come as a setback variance as opposed to height variance. It could have been moved down the slope, things of that nature? Were those considered in the design phase?
Yeah, they were, and part of that is ramping and so on to get into the parkade. The other part was to minimize the amount of cutting and blasting into the mountain. So it was all a balance of these of physical constraints as well as the requirements under the bylaw. And we did work hard with the planning department and coming up with a good solution, I believe.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Schmidt. I think we'll keep all of this in our minds as we wait for the report from the director, and we'll give the residents and Ms. Calder an opportunity to speak to why they're still concerned.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Calder, and again, I'm going to try and keep you to 10 minutes if, yeah. And we'll try and keep the support from the gallery to a modest. Okay.
Okay, good evening. My name's Catherine Calder. I live in the strata adjacent to this proposed development. And thank you for listening to our concerns. Doug Nogler from the other strata. I'm from one strata, and he's going to talk for just a couple minutes after this slideshow, so I just want to let you know that. So here are some of our concerns. We have environmental concerns. The OCP says land of slopes over 30% is not suitable for residential development, and this property, it's between 30 and 60% slope for the most part. And it also says for DPA 4 and 5 that there should be an environmental assessment done on this type of sloped property, and there has been no environmental assessment of any kind done. So we think that that's a necessity. All buildings for this proposed development, as you all know, are over the allowable height variance of 10.5 meters. And this is building 8, which will be in front of the strata I live in. And the existing building, you can see by the title there, the proposed building is higher than the existing building, according to this drawing. This building's going to be built on a slope of over 60%. And the developer says that because of the steep slope, he needs a height variances to build affordable housing. And this suggests this property is not suitable for this development. This road will be the road separating the two stratas, and it's only 6 meters wide. And you can see it will block the light for both buildings. There's very little privacy there. And you can see the building comes almost right up to the road. This is a picture of that same road, so imagine the building right on the other side of that one vehicle there. The fire department says that this road has to be 7 meters wide, and I don't know how they're going to do that when they're going to have the building right up against the edge of the road. Also, this is the access road for 3 buildings, 5, 6, and 7. They will be all the vehicles, 70 vehicles for those parking spaces will go down this road. I think you just saw a picture of people biking and walking on this road. I don't know how that can happen with all the vehicles that will be using this road to access the parking spaces in those 3 buildings at the end. I also don't know if this is considered the main entrance, but according to bylaw 430, it says that in the front entrance, it should be 9 meters in front of a residential building. So I'm not sure about that. Planners might know. There's been a little bit of misleading information. Read the Form P. The architect did just explain it to you, but I just feel it's been implied that this is a quote from the developer in a letter he wrote, said he consulted with the neighbors who all signed the Form P. So I know we didn't sign the Form P in our strata, and we weren't required to, but it just seems that it's been implied that we have signed this and we all agreed with this development in our strata, and we did not agree with it or even know about it. The only building we knew about was the Phase 4 building that's completed already. And as the architect explained, we would have never signed an agreement that would give up access to our garages or put us in violation of Sechelt bylaws. Those are our garages that we have no rights to right now. This is building number 6. It's going to be 16.545 meters in height. That's the, I don't know how to use a pointer, sorry, but anyway, that's the new building, building number 4. And it's missing another balcony there. There is another floor below those 2 stories you're seeing there, because I know there's 3 balconies. I went out there and counted again today. So there are some units on that lower level. So if you look at the height of that proposed building, that the lower level for sure will have completely, their view will be blocked, and a little bit on the second level from the way it appears. And these people have just bought these units, and they were sold view condos, and their view is going to get blocked, some of them anyway. So there's a lot of parking associated with, like parking structures associated with these 6 buildings. And because 80 units, there's going to be 137 parking spaces. And that's how many are required to service the density. And this suggests that the size of the development is not appropriate for this site because there's all the parking's attached to the buildings, and this is one of the larger parkades that the architect mentioned is going to be in front of the Phase 4 building. We are concerned about during construction. This is a construction site. You can see how close our buildings are to the site. And the geotechnical report has said there will be some ground movement during construction. He also has stated there might be some slope instability, and there also may be blasting required. So because we are so close and it's such a steep slope, we are very concerned about damage to our buildings. Buildings 5 and 6 will be the highest buildings on Porpoise Bay, and they're only 15 meters back from the water. And you can see Porpoise Bay Wharf in the background there, so I'm pretty sure they're going to be visible from the wharf and the water. This is the site for Building 5. The trees have already been cleared. And this is how our neighborhood looks. There's lots of space. This is our condos on the left, our stratas on the left, and that's a different strata complex on the right. But you can see in our neighborhood, the buildings have been built. They're not more than 3 stories high. The ones on the left are towards the water. They're lower than the ones behind them. There's lots of space and light and privacy, unlike the proposed development, where you could see how close the buildings were together. So it's going to change the character of the neighborhood. Is it going to be affordable housing? I know that the Phase 4 units, the average price was $530,000. I'm not sure if that's considered affordable housing these days. And I want to remind you, there was a lot of opposition to the height variances. 115 residents of Sechelt signed a petition opposing the approval of the height variances. And I just, in conclusion, want to say that this development would have a negative impact on our neighborhood. It increases building heights and density, increases traffic. It's going to create that narrow laneway between the buildings, reduce air quality, 137 more parking spaces, block light, block views, remove trees and vegetation used by birds and animals. So I don't think it presents a friendly face to the neighborhood, as the OCP states. It's a massive development. The buildings are all joined together by these parkades and covered parking things, and it's a huge structure. It just doesn't fit this neighborhood. So I'm going to ask Doug to come and speak now. This is Doug Nogler. He lives in the new strata that was just built.
Thank you, Ms. Calder.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, everybody. My name is Doug Nogler, and my wife and I, Ariel Boisvert, just bought a place in the concerned strata here. We are moving here from Vancouver at the end of this month, and although we will continue to work in Vancouver, there were quite a few reasons that we chose to move to Sechelt. One being my wife was born and raised here, and we have family here and a lot of close friends, and have spent a ton of time here in the last 10 years. And so when we decided we were going to start a family, Sechelt became a very appealing option for us. The other reason is, we're in Vancouver right now, and it has largely become unlivable largely due to the shady business tactics of realtors and developers there. It has, my wife and I do well. She's a movie producer, I'm a music producer. And even for us, buying a place in Vancouver was not going to work. So when we saw a beautiful spot here, a 4-bedroom unit with a beautiful ocean view, it was a pretty easy decision to make, and we jumped on it. So now instead of a view of downtown alley Vancouver, I'll have a view of Eagles and a beautiful waterfront, which is, an $800,000 view is what we paid for that. And we were extremely confident with our decision, especially because the week before we made that offer, this council had denied that height variance. So that verdict that you made secured our decision to buy our place, specifically due to that, knowing that when we saw it and fell in love with it, it was not going to be changing significantly. Obviously, we were aware that there was going to be more development, but we were told that variance had been declined. What we saw was what we were going to get. And when we made our purchase, there was no indication from the realtor or from the developer that they were going to be in any way trying to appeal that verdict. And they would all know that, as there are relationships that extend beyond professional there. So just to recap, what they did was sell us an unobstructed view of the water. And then as soon as that check cleared, they promptly turned around and came to you to ask you to allow them to obstruct our view. And there's a term for that. And it's called a fucking con job.
Just watch your language and be careful of the accusations.
Sorry.
The accusations are...
Sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody. I apologize.
Yeah, but
But if this action is any indication of this company's concern for the community, then every resident has cause for concern and should be extremely worried, because they're not only are they refusing to deal with the surmounting problems in the existing development, but they're not bringing anything new to the table here. They're not bringing any changes, any advancements, no additional environmental impact assessment research. Simply put, they're asking your permission to take advantage of people whose money they already took. And as residents, we trust that you, the representatives of the community, made the right decision the first time. And we can easily look to Vancouver as a prime example of what happens when this type of deceptive and dishonest behavior goes unchecked. The situation becomes untenable, the city becomes unlivable, and the population becomes unhappy. And it's imperative that we recognize the warning signs and do whatever is in our power to make sure Sechelt remains a community for the residents and not a honeypot for the developers. So, thank you for hearing me out. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
No. Well, we'll ask if there's questions, but I think the last presentation was not well done, even though you've just congratulated on it. You want to be careful about the kind of accusations you make in public, and you want to be careful about the tone. So, because immediately it's going to want... I'm going to ask you not to, Chris, because I think we'll just let it sit where it is, because it'll...
There needs to be clarification, because we've been accused.
I know.
Of being very unfair. We have had nothing to do with the purchases that have taken place here. And all of the people who have bought in Grandview, they were given a disclosure document that has been registered, and they all have signed off on it. The people who have bought recently in the past in the past 3 phases, okay, we had nothing to do with those 3 phases. We had nothing to do with those sales, and this is just very, very unfair to accuse a developer who's been working with this community in honesty, upfront with this community, to be allowed this type of behavior to take place and people
I'm trying to-
being put down for something that they're not responsible. They need to be addressing those realtors who have sold them the units, those realtors who have told them that they're gonna have views, and they need to simply come here and take a look at a property that has been zoned for over 2 decades, which allows those buildings to be built, and they were never supposed to have any views anyways,
okay.
even according to the original Form
Just-
P that was given to them.
I can't let this meeting degenerate anymore. We all know who the realtors were. So let's be clear about those things. And we don't want this to degenerate any further than what it was and has been. So I'm going to end this part of the discussion. It's now 40 minutes as opposed to 10 minutes each, which would be 20. This is coming back to council with a report. There's 2 things you need to know. It's very, very unusual for councils to change decisions unless there's significantly new information or mistakes that were made. So any requests for changes are probably not going to happen. We don't know that until we've seen the reports. There are variances that we have not looked at yet, and those are the ones that are coming forward, and we'll be looking at those carefully. On the Form Ps, we've all learned a lot more about Form P in the last 6 months than we knew before. There's 2 sides on that. The differences of opinion between the developer and some of the residents is purely technical. They're either signed or they're not signed. The legal documents are what they are, and we'll let that play out where it is. There's a second set of issues between the District of Sechelt and our approval of Form Ps, and that also is relatively technical, and that will be included in the report that's coming up to us, so council actually knows what's in line there. I don't know if other councillors have had the opportunity yet. I've read most of not all of the Form P, not the full 100 pages yet. I've seen the 100 pages and decided I wasn't going to read the whole thing, but I've read significant parts of it. And so we do know what's involved there, and all of council will have access to that before it comes back or as it comes back with that report. So thank you tonight. I'm sorry emotions run as high as they do. Given that most of you probably don't want to hear the rest of the council, I'll give a 2-minute recess if you want so people can leave. Otherwise, you can stay and see us conduct the rest of our business. So, and please don't continue the discussion too much outside with things got a little bit too heated there. And I wouldn't mind talking to you actually, Doug, because I talked to your father-in-law just after you bought it. I think we should just let them carry. Okay, let's continue our agenda. And item 4 is a proclamation for Sunshine Coast Pride Month, which is an opportunity to acknowledge and recognize the importance of tolerance and acceptance and inclusion and communities that get along in the broadest possible way, as opposed to disagreeing and not getting along. So whereas, this is for June 2018. Whereas the District of Sechelt and the whole Sunshine Coast has a large and diverse, multi-generational, multi-ethnic community of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, and two-spirit people. And whereas Sunshine Coast Pride has evolved from an annual Pride dance to a month of Pride events celebrating LGBTQ2 people, arts, culture, and recreation. And whereas Sunshine Coast Pride Month brings visibility to both the LGBTQ2, and I'm really glad you've spelled that out because I can never get it right when I'm not reading it, LGBTQ2 people who call this home, and the multitude of exceptional allies in the community, all of whom strive to create a safe and inclusive community free from prejudice and discrimination. And whereas the visibility of our LGBTQ2 and allies community is especially important to LGBTQ2 youth, because it helps create a healthy, supportive, welcoming, and safe place that they can call home. Now, therefore, I, Bruce Milne, in the spirit of pride, do hereby proclaim that June 2018 shall be known as Sunshine Coast Pride Month in the District of Sechelt. Thank you. And, yay. We raised the pride flag on June 1st, and it'll be up. It's still up, isn't it? For a while. I don't know if it's for the whole month or for the week. That's why I didn't want to say how long it would be up for. And the Pride Parade and Pride in the Park is June 24th. So I hope everyone can come to that and participate. Thank you. And item 5, adoption of minutes of previous council meeting. The meeting, first a motion to receive the minutes of Wednesday, May 16th, 2018. Thank you, Councillor Wright and Councillor Mueller. Any errors or omissions that people saw in there? I actually saw a couple of things in the council reports that I thought were worth, because it sort of had a different intention. And I'll let Councillor Seegers and Councillor Mueller note, but on page 12 of our agenda, Councillor Seegers, I think you were the deputy parade marshal last year and the parade marshal this year. And what you had actually said that last year you found there was a lot of running involved. There was a lot of running involved. And what they actually said was last year she was the runner-up. So I think we don't really have a contest for parade marshal. It's an appointment that people are, we're really pleased that Councillor Seeger is doing that. But it was a lot of running involved. And of course, role is spelt incorrectly in that paragraph. The other one that had a slightly different intent was in Councillor Mueller's, right near the end of his report, where he indicated he'd had a brief meeting with myself, and it was actually another brief meeting with Michael Houle. So it actually reads as if he had a brief meeting with the mayor and the chair of the Advisory Planning Commission. So I'd prefer if that one was restated to say he also had meetings with mayor and with the chair of the Advisory and Planning Commission, because they were separate meetings. There's going to be lots and lots of unusual meetings in the next 3 or 4 months, but that wasn't one of them. If there's nothing else in those minutes in terms of errors or omissions, a motion to adopt. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Mueller. All those in favor? That's carried. And any business arising from those minutes? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. First of all, my agenda has no page numbers, so just so you know. So on, I believe it's page 10, and this pertains to something further on in the agenda this evening. We actually made a motion to amend the naming of the hospital in the elections bylaw, and I believe that when we gave it third reading, we gave it the amended motion third reading, and then later on in the agenda, we're looking to rescind third reading and give it again. I think we've already taken care of the issue.
I agree. That's an issue, a process that I didn't have a chance to talk to the corporate officer about. So my understanding is that council can amend at second or third reading, and in that case we did. Corporate officers actually requested that it come back to us tonight to rescind and do in a final version. It's interesting, but corporate officer, can you comment on why that's coming back?
Yes, thank you. Yes, as Councillor Seegers indicated, Council did pass a resolution directing that the bylaw be amended. However,